Came home to a different lock. That was the first thing. I'd been gone 18 months. Houston to Denver and back, working back-to-back contracts as a forensic accountant for a regional insurance firm. And when I slid my key into the front door of my own house, the key I'd had since I signed the closing documents 4 years ago, it didn't turn. I tried again. Jiggled it. Tried a third time the way you do when you refuse to believe something obvious. The lock was new. Brushed nickel. I had a brass one. I stood on my own porch, rolling my suitcase behind me, and I thought, that's weird. Maybe there was a break-in while I was gone. Maybe my sister changed it for safety reasons. She'd been staying there. We'd agreed on that. She was between apartments and I didn't want the house sitting empty, and she was family, so it made sense at the time. It made sense. I called her. She didn't pick up. I called again. Voicemail. I texted. Nothing for about 6 minutes, and then, can we talk tomorrow? I'm at dinner. Something moved in my stomach. Not quite alarm. More like the feeling you get when you're reading a contract and you hit a clause that shouldn't be there. That low-grade wrongness that hasn't become a problem yet, but is about to. I called our mother. She picked up on the second ring. Lena, she said, and her voice did something strange, flattened. Like she was bracing. Mom, my key doesn't work. Silence. Mom, your sister. She stopped. Started again. There's something you need to know. But this isn't a conversation for tonight. Tell me right now. Another silence. Longer this time. And then she said very quietly, your sister sold the house, honey. I didn't say anything. I was standing on the porch of a house that had cost me $240,000. My down payment from 6 years of saving, my mortgage I'd been paying faithfully. My name on the deed, and my mother had just told me my sister sold it. She sold it, I repeated. Not a question. More like I was testing the words in my mouth to see if they were real. She needed the money. She was in a bad place. She thought, Mom. Stop talking. I hung up. Her name is Renata. She's 3 years older than me, and we were close growing up. Or I thought we were. She's the kind of person who fills a room, laughs loudly, makes everyone feel like they're the most interesting person she's ever met. She's also the kind of person who has been in a financial crisis, of some variety for as long as I can remember. Not in a dramatic way, not gambling debts or anything like that, just always slightly underwater, always one unexpected expense away from needing a loan. She'd borrowed from me before, small amounts, 400 here, 1,000 there, always with the same easy confidence that she'd pay me back soon. And she always did, eventually, so I never worried about it much. When I took the Denver contracts, I'd actually been relieved she could stay in the house. She'd just broken up with a long-term boyfriend and lost the apartment they'd shared. And my house in Austin had a guest room that was going to sit empty anyway. I didn't charge her rent. She offered to cover utilities. We shook on it like adults. I gave her a spare key. That was it, just a spare key. What I didn't give her, what I never gave her, what I never even mentioned to her, was power of attorney. I know what you're probably thinking. How does someone sell a house they don't own? It's harder than people assume, which is what the top comment on this video will probably point out. But it's not impossible. And when your sister knows your social security number, your date of birth, your mother's maiden name, the name of your first pet, when your sister has been in your life for 31 years and knows you well enough to answer your security questions, the impossible starts to get very possible. Here's what she did. She found a notary through someone she knew, someone willing to notarize documents without verifying identity properly. She filed a fraudulent power of attorney with my name on it, granting herself authority to act on my behalf in real estate transactions. Then she listed the house, worked with an agent who either didn't look closely enough or looked the other way, and sold it for $218,000. I found all of this out later, piece by piece, the way I always find things out, by following the paper trail. But that night, standing on my own porch, I didn't know any of it yet. I just knew the lock was wrong and my mother had said the words, your sister sold the house, and I needed somewhere to sleep. I drove to a Marriott on the I-35 corridor and sat on the edge of the bed in my work clothes and tried to think like a professional instead of a person. It didn't work. I cried for about an hour. Ugly crying, the kind where you can't catch your breath. Then I washed my face, ordered room service, and opened my laptop. The first thing I pulled up was the Travis County Appraisal District. Your county appraisal records are public. Anyone can look them up. I searched my address. The property was listed under a different name, a man I'd never heard of. I'll call him the buyer because his name isn't relevant to the story. Had purchased my house 42 days earlier. The recorded sale price was $218,000. The transaction looked completely clean from the outside. I sat with that for a moment. 42 days. While I was wrapping up my last Denver contract, attending the going-away lunch my colleagues threw for me, packing my car, driving 12 hours back to Texas, my house was already gone. Had been gone for over a month. I searched for the deed transfer. Found it. My name was on it as the seller. The signature was not mine, but I didn't know that yet. I only knew I hadn't signed anything. I checked for a power of attorney on file. Found it. Dated 4 months earlier. 4 months. She'd planned this 4 months in advance. That was the moment something shifted for me. Not toward anger. Anger came later. Toward clarity. Because this wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a desperate person doing a stupid thing in a panic. This was deliberate. This was premeditated. And the person who had planned it, who had sat down and figured out how to steal $218,000 from her own sister and then let her drive home and find out from a parking spot in her own driveway, that person had been texting me memes 2 weeks ago and asking if I wanted to do Thanksgiving together this year. I ordered a second coffee from room service, and I got to work. I've been doing forensic accounting for 8 years. Most of my cases are corporate, embezzlement, insurance fraud, falsified expense reports. I know how money moves when people are trying to hide it. I know what a paper trail looks like when someone is trying to erase it. And I know that nobody erases it completely. There is always something left. I started with the power of attorney document. It had been notarized by someone with a commission number I could look up. I looked it up. The notary's name was registered in Texas. I made a note of it. I pulled the listing history from my address. The house had been listed for 11 days before going under contract. It sold for asking price, which told me my sister had underpriced it, $218,000 for a house in South Austin that I purchased at $240,000, and which had appreciated considerably was low. She took the discount because she wanted it to move fast. She didn't want it sitting on the market. I found the real estate agent. Licensed, active, 6 years in the business. Made another note. Then I looked for Renata. Her social media was still public. She'd never been particularly careful about that. I found her Instagram 3 weeks ago, a photo of the Pacific Ocean. Caption, finally. 2 weeks ago, a brunch photo. Somewhere with palm trees. Mimosas. She was wearing a new dress I'd never seen. 1 week ago, a story she'd bought a car. A used Mercedes, she said, but still. A Mercedes, she said, but still. A Mercedes. I screenshotted everything. I know you're thinking, why didn't you just call the cops that night? I did think about it, but I've seen enough fraud cases to know that walking into a police station with no documentation and saying my sister sold my house is not the same as walking in with a file. The more organized I was, the better chance I had, and I wanted every chance I had. I compiled what I could that night. The deed transfer, the power of attorney, the listing records, the appraisal, and at 7 a.m, I called a real estate attorney in Austin named someone I'd been referred to once through a colleague. She called me back at 8:15 and told me to come in at 10. The attorney. I'll call her my attorney, because she's still mine and I don't advertise her business in my stories. Walked me through exactly what had happened in that calm, matter-of-fact way that good lawyers have, like they've seen worse and they probably have. Fraudulent power of attorney. Forged signature. The notary had either been complicit or catastrophically negligent. We'd let the investigation determine which. The good news, she said, is that Texas has strong protections for title fraud victims. The sale will be voided. What about the buyer? I asked. He's living in my house right now. He'll be made whole through title insurance. He'll lose some time and some inconvenience, but he won't lose money. That's what title insurance is for. I hadn't thought about the buyer much until that moment, and when I did, I felt genuinely terrible for him. He'd bought a house in good faith. He'd probably moved his furniture in, maybe painted a room, maybe introduced himself to the neighbors. And he was going to come home one day to a knock on the door telling him the whole transaction was fraudulent. None of this was his fault, but the law was clear. The property was mine. The sale was void. Now, my attorney said, leaning forward slightly, let's talk about the criminal side. I knew where Renata was because I'd found her by then. It hadn't taken long. She checked in on Facebook at a restaurant in Los Angeles 3 days earlier, and she tagged a friend in the photo, and that friend's Instagram showed them both at an apartment complex in Silver Lake. I had a general neighborhood. I also had her phone number, which had not changed. She called me first, actually. 4 days after I got back to Austin, I was sitting in my attorney's parking lot when my phone buzzed. I picked up. Hey, she said. Careful. Like she was testing the temperature. Hi. Silence. Then, Mom said you came back. I did. Look, Lena, I'm listening. She took a breath, and then she said something I have replayed in my head probably 100 times since. She said, I needed a reset. I was drowning. The money from the house, I know it wasn't mine, okay? I know, but I was going to pay you back. I have a plan. I'm freelancing out here and I already have 2 clients, and I was going to, Renata. What? I filed a report with the Austin Police Department this morning. She went very quiet. I've also filed a complaint with the Texas Real Estate Commission and contacted the State Notary Oversight Board. My attorney has submitted the documents to have the sale voided, and I have a forensic file on the transaction that I will be turning over to investigators this week. Nothing on the line for a long moment, just her breathing. You're serious, she finally said. Did you think I wasn't going to? I'm your sister. And that was the thing that cracked something open in me. Not sadness, more like a kind of exhausted recognition, because she really believed that. She really believed that being my sister was a defense, that the word family was supposed to be a firewall between her and consequences, that I was going to stand in my own attorney's parking lot, having just discovered that the person I trusted with my home had stolen it from me with 4 months of planning, and I was going to say, okay, fine, you're my sister, let's figure it out. You're my sister, I said, and you forged my signature, filed fraudulent documents with the county, and sold my house while I was 12 hours away. So, I hung up. She called our mother. Our mother called me. This is a predictable sequence of events that I had, in fact, predicted. My mother is not a bad person. She is a person who has spent her entire life smoothing things over, and she does it with the best intentions, and it has never once made anything better. She called me crying and said that Renata was scared and that she was sorry and that she just needed time to get on her feet. And couldn't we find a way to handle this without destroying the family? I told my mother that I loved her. I told her that Renata had destroyed the family when she made the choice to file a fraudulent power of attorney, not when I filed a police report. Not when I retained an attorney. The thing that broke the family was the choice. Everything after that was just the choice having consequences. My mother was quiet for a while. Then she said, I know you're right. She's my kid. So am I said. I'm your kid too. She didn't have an answer for that. The investigation took about 3 months. I won't walk through every detail because some of it is still in process. But here's what I can tell you. The power of attorney was definitively identified as fraudulent. A handwriting analyst confirmed the signature was not mine. The notary, it turned out, had notarized the document without the signer present, which is a Class A misdemeanor in Texas that can escalate to a felony depending on circumstances. Her commission was suspended pending investigation. The real estate agent was investigated by the Texas Real Estate Commission. The finding was negligence rather than fraud. She hadn't verified the power of attorney's authenticity the way she should have. Her license was placed under a compliance review. Renata was arrested in Los Angeles. The Austin PD coordinated with LAPD and she was taken in on a Tuesday morning. Fraud, forgery, and theft, or $200,000. That last one is a first-degree felony in Texas. The buyer got his money back through title insurance, plus his moving costs. I wrote him a letter. He was gracious about it. We'll probably never speak again, and that's fine, but I wanted him to know that I was sorry it happened to him, and that I hoped his next house was better. My house is mine again. The sale was voided. I had to go through a process to have everything re-recorded correctly with the county, and there was paperwork, a lot of paperwork, but my name is on the deed. The new lock. I picked out a matte black one. I figured I deserved to choose something for once. Here's the thing about all of this that I still think about. Renata didn't do this because she was desperate in the way people sometimes imagine, behind on rent, about to be evicted, running out of options. She did it because she'd gotten used to options appearing when she needed them. Someone always came through. A loan here, a favor there. The universe arranged itself around her the way it does for people who've never really had to sit with a consequence. She told the detective, I read this in the case notes later, that she planned to pay me back from her freelance income within 2 years. She genuinely believed this. She had built an entire moral framework in which taking $218,000 from her sister, without asking, was a loan she'd taken without permission rather than a theft. The seed capital, she called it. She had a vision, she said. She just needed a foundation. The detective, apparently, had heard something like this before. He noted it and moved on. I think about the buyer sometimes. I think about my mother, who still calls me every Sunday and doesn't mention Renata unless I ask, which I sometimes do. I think about what I would have said if Renata had just called me when she was in trouble. If she'd said, I'm drowning, instead of filing documents at the county clerk's office, I would have helped her. Not $200,000 worth, but something. I would have done something. I would have done something. But she didn't ask. She decided. And there's a version of her that maybe still believes I'm the one who made this hard. I don't know how to fix that. I'm not sure I'm supposed to. What I know is this. I came home to a different lock, and the lock is mine now, and I chose it. And when I turned the key for the first time on a November afternoon, and the door swung open into my own house, my floors, my windows, the dent in the kitchen wall from when I moved a bookshelf by myself, I stood there for a minute in the doorway. Just stood there. And then I went inside and I started to figure out what to do next. That's all any of us can do, I think. Find the door. Get the key that works. Go inside. Whatever happened after that, whatever Renata is doing right now, in whatever holding situation she's in, whatever my mother is carrying, whatever the notary is telling her own family about why her commission is suspended, all of that is outside my door. I closed it. I locked it. The lock is matte black. It was my choice, and I'm still here. I've thought a lot about the word reset since all of this happened. That's what Renata called it. A reset. Like what she needed was a fresh start, and what she did was just the method she chose to get there. Inconvenient, maybe. A little messy, but ultimately justifiable, because the outcome was going to be good for her. That's the logic. I've turned it over in my head enough times that I can see it from the inside now, and it's terrifying how clean it feels when you're the one living it. She wasn't a villain in her own story. She was a person who needed something and found a way to get it. The fact that the way involved my name, my deed, my 8 years of savings, that was just a detail. I think about what it takes to build that kind of thinking. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow accumulation of small moments where someone does something they shouldn't and nothing bad follows. A borrowed 20 that doesn't get paid back and nobody says anything. A favor that was never really a favor, but gets framed that way and accepted as such. Every time the consequence doesn't come, the ceiling rises a little. What's possible expands. And eventually you're sitting at a desk filing a fraudulent power of attorney on your sister's house, and you genuinely believe that this is a problem you'll solve later. That later will come. That you'll be the kind of person by then who makes it right. The consequence always comes. It just sometimes takes longer than it should. What I keep returning to is not the anger. The anger faded faster than I expected, but the clarity. There's something that happens when you stop asking how could she do this and start asking what do I do now? The first question pulls you backward. The second one moves you forward. I made that switch somewhere around 2 a.m. in a Marriott room with a cold cup of coffee and my laptop open, and I think that switch is the thing that saved me. Not saved me in a dramatic sense, just kept me from drowning in the wrong direction. I am a forensic accountant. I spent 8 years learning how to follow money when someone is trying to make it disappear. I did not choose that career so I could use it on my own family. But I had the skill, and when the moment came, I used it. That's the thing about building something real in yourself, a genuine capability, a craft you've actually put time into. It doesn't leave you when things go wrong. It's there. You reach for it, and it's there. Renata had options the whole time. She could have called me. She could have said she was struggling and asked for help, and I would have done what I could. Instead, she chose a path that required her to deceive, to forge, to plan across 4 months while texting me normally and asking about Thanksgiving. That's not desperation. That's a character being revealed. And character, I've come to believe, is just the sum of the choices you make when you think nobody is watching or when you're sure you can outrun the fallout. She couldn't outrun it. Nobody can, not really. The paper trail was always there. The notary's commission number was always on file. The county records were always public. The Instagram posts were still up. Everything she thought she'd buried was just waiting to be found by someone who knew how to look. I'm not glad it happened. I want to be clear about that. I would trade all of it. The legal victory, the voided sale, the matte black lock I chose for myself. I would trade it to have a sister I could actually trust. That's the loss that doesn't get recorded anywhere. Not in the county deed. Not in the police report. Just in me. Quietly, on Sunday afternoons, when my mother calls and we talk around the shape of what used to be there. But I'm still here. The house is mine, and I know now, more than I ever did before, exactly what I'm made of. That's not nothing. That's actually everything.